Well, good morning and welcome to the Business Owners Strategy Forum. And it's great to see everybody again this week. We're up to week 10 of this particular forum, and it's been fantastic to be able to deliver all this knowledge and content to everybody out there. So obviously the purpose of the forum that we created 10 weeks ago is all about sort of connecting with business owners, sharing relevant information and supporting us through this quite difficult time and navigating through that and creating strategies to help us, navigate through this complexity. So obviously we've selected great presenters over this past 10 weeks, and that was all about making sure that we're delivering the right amount of content to you guys and girls to ensure that we're actually able to help you navigate through this complex time. So once again, I'm your presenter today. My name is Matt Murphy. I'm the Managing Director of Prima Canyon Business Advisory. And we've got some wonderful speakers again today. That we've got Scott Taylor and Gary Hamilton from Taylor David Lawyers that are going to talk about dealing with corporate financial distress during a pandemic. So obviously, we're all business owners and directors, and we're all responsible for obviously running organisations responsibly. And really, right now, it's really important to ensure that the decisions that we're making aren't going to cause us some stress in the future or some issues that we've got to deal with in our businesses. So it's really important to be across all the laws that have actually also changed at this particular point in time. So Scott and Gary are going to cover across that. And we're also going to hear from James Horn, who's the Managing Director of Balance Internet. And they're into sort of business digital transformation, and that's really what James is an expert in, and he's going to talk about today in terms of putting businesses and transferring them from sort of reality into the digital space, and got some great stories and case studies around that particular thing. E-commerce platforms and pivoting businesses from sort of face-to-face reality into sort of a digital world, and we're going to hear from James in regards to that. So once again, some great presenters, great content today that I'm really pleased that I'm able to deliver to you. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Scott and Gary to present on their topic today. And as per usual, there's a Q&A button that we've got on the screen. So if there's any questions at all, please write them in the Q&A, and then we can address them later on. Also, some other housekeeping as well, that my internet's not as stable as what it otherwise normally is. So I apologise if there's some dropping in and out from that sort of stuff. We'll obviously go for presentation for the next sort of 45, and if there's some questions, we'll hang around and do some questions for that period of time up until 12 o'clock. So I'm going to hand it over to Scott now. If you want to take yourself off mute and share your video, that would be great. And then if you want to share your presentation, that would be good too, Scott. So welcome. Thank you very much for presenting today on this particular topic. It's obviously not an overly positive topic in terms of its creativity, but it's one that's certainly necessary when we're running businesses and making sure that we're protecting our business, our people and ourselves in terms of the difficulties and complexities of running businesses, especially through this pandemic and crisis that we've got at the moment. So thanks, Scott. I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, mate. No, you're exactly right. It's certainly not a glamorous topic, but by no means does that make it any less important. I'll just share my screen.
That's come up. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for the opportunity to present this morning, Matt. So just to give everyone a little bit of an introduction in insolvency law. The majority of my practice is acting for insolvency practitioners, so the liquidators, the bankruptcy trustees, the voluntary administrators and receivers and so forth at the end of a company's life. So on the flip side, providing advice to clients in the restructuring phase, I'm put in a pretty unique position where I see what potential risk exposures might come after the life of a company. So I'm able to advise companies on the lead up on how to mitigate that risk. And today, hopefully I can give you a little bit of insight into how to avoid some of those exposures. That's just a little disclaimer that lawyers like to include before they speak publicly. Okay, just in terms of the general exposures for companies in financial distress. So I just wanted to explore how companies initially get into financial distress. So the stem of financial problems, largely in my experience, always centers around mismanagement. Having accurate forecasts, particularly getting behind in taxation obligations, market adaptation issues, and not keeping up with the market or monitoring competitive behaviour, and a general head in the sand approach, sort of an it'll be right attitude. So there's a bit of a misconception, I think, by a lot of directors that because the company is in debt, that there'll be no personal liability for the director ultimately. I'll get into potential personal exposures a little bit later, as will Gary. But just in terms of the stem of other financial problems, adverse court proceedings can lead to financial distress, as can other circumstances beyond our control, including regulatory changes and, of course, COVID-19 in everyone's current situation. So these are all issues that should really be part of a risk register of a company. So a risk register is a document that risk and exposure and kind of grades them and works out if a potential risk is real and what the likelihood of that occurring will be. So you grade it, and then you work out what your strategy is going to be in order to manage it. You also have a list of who in your organisation is going to be responsible for it. If anyone does want a template for a risk register, you're more than welcome to send me an email and I'll happily provide one. So financial distress, it can, any one of those problems I've just covered can potentially lead to external administration, so the appointment of a liquidator, voluntary administrator or receiver. And that can also result in personal liabilities for directors by way of director penalty notices issued by the Australian Taxation Office, creditors pursuing personal guarantees. Directors should be aware that most equipment financing financier to pursue that guarantor for any shortfall in the equity. And of course, it can also result in personal liability for insolvent trading, which will be covered by Gary Hamilton after my presentation. I think it's also very important to point out that many directors seem to be under the impression that their assets are protected because they're in the name of their wife or their husband. So this is one of the most common misconceptions in circumstances where an individual is declared bankrupt. A large portion of the actions that I pursue on behalf of bankruptcy trustees are typically to recover a percentage of the value of the net equity in those marital assets. So more often than not, that can include the family home, which might be in the sole name of the wife or husband. So just important for directors to be aware of. So what is insolvency? Generally, companies insolvent if it's unable to pay its debts as and when they fall due. So whilst this definition might sound simple enough, it's actually very technical to establish factually, or establish at law, I should say. So defining when a company might be insolvent, it's certainly a standalone topic in itself that I could talk about for many hours. But if you do suspect your company might be insolvent now, or it might likely become insolvent at some point in the future, it's just very important that you seek some advice immediately from your accountant or lawyer. So in March this year, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the federal government announced temporary insolvency reform to assist businesses through the pandemic. So these measures have had the effect of 20,000. And also it's increased the period of time for a company to comply with a statutory demand from 21 days to 6 months. So I think it's important to be aware that previously, if a company did not comply or respond to a statutory demand within that 21-day period, there is a statutory presumption that the company is insolvent. So extending that from 21 days to 6 months, up to 6 months, I should say, is quite significant. Also, the minimum bankruptcy notice amount has been increased from $5,000 to $20,000, and equally, an individual debtor has up to 6 months to respond to that bankruptcy notice. And quite importantly for directors, they are temporarily relieved of their duty to prevent insolvent trading up until that 25 September date. Again, Gary will cover off insolvent trading in his presentation shortly. So whilst these reforms are welcome news for many debtors, it is creating a number of practical challenges for creditors. So just yesterday, we were contacted by a client who was owed several $1 million, which is undisputed. The debtor knows there's little that the creditor can do up until at least the 25th of September. So it is giving leverage to debtors, rightly or wrongly. I mean, there are positives and negatives associated, but obviously there are practical difficulties. That the stimulus packages are not indefinite. I'm of the view that the packages have created a bit of a false sense of security for some businesses, in the sense that they're not really mindful of what might happen when they run out. I don't think it is going to be the case that the economy will immediately return to the way it was pre-COVID-19 once these packages do run out. So I think it's very important to plan ahead and be mindful of that very fact. Many companies, in my view, will face the prospect of becoming insolvent once the stimulus packages cease. As an insolvency lawyer, many people have asked me in the previous weeks if I've been busy with new inquiries and so forth. The answer is generally, I haven't had a lot of new inquiries from clients wanting to go into external administration. We have certainly been assisting people to navigate through and access stimulus packages and so forth. But what I am expecting is once these stimulus packages do start to run out, which may in fact be sooner than September this year as well, I will get a great deal more inquiry. And the reason there is a lot of companies have cash reserves they can rely upon, and generally try and exhaust all of their cash before they actually do press the button. So again, I think it is important for businesses to actually seek some advice before they do exhaust all of that cash, because a lot of the time there can be greater alternates available and additional avenues rather than being reactive once you've got no money in the bank. I just wanted to give a bit of an example of how we're assisting clients and where one instance of a client who's been particularly proactive in this whole climate. So we act for quite a large furniture wholesaler. This wholesaler quite proactively approached me in early April and indicated that his company had record sales. Of course, everyone working remotely wanted office furniture to set up their home offices and so forth. So unfortunately for him, fortunately for him, he's doing quite well when in a particularly difficult economic climate, but he didn't qualify for any of the stimulus packages because of the increase in sales. Rightfully, he's concerned that in the next few months, when people start to return to work, there's going to be a significant concerned that he might need to change his current trade terms to ensure he's paid by current retailers. And that's a potential exposure, particularly in circumstances where he doesn't have the same tools available to him as he would pre-COVID-19 to issue statutory demands and so forth. So there are real issues for a number of companies, and they certainly should be thoroughly explored and proactively planned for. In terms of mitigating your exposure and the takeaways from today, certainly lean on your accountant to access all available stimulus packages and do so very quickly after they're announced. So, for example, the Queensland State Government announced a new $10,000 grant, I think on Wednesday this week. I checked this morning, that's already at 44% capacity. So it's really important that people are certainly keeping up to date with what is available, regularly talking to their accountant and their lawyer, making sure that they are applying in time and they're not missing out on a number of these packages. Also be aware of the potential risks to your particular industry. Again, ideally adopting a risk register. Set a well-crafted budget. Try and preserve as much liquidity as you possibly can. Plan for 25 September 2020 and beyond. Be mindful that these stimulus packages are not forever. And as I've intimated throughout the presentation, rely upon and seek regular advice from your accountant and lawyer, because ultimately you're going to get some guidance and your interests are going to be best protected if you are seeking advice. So that pretty much brings me to a close. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Scott. Obviously, some pertinent information that we need to take fairly seriously in normal circumstances, because as business owners running businesses and being directors, there's exposure everywhere and risk everywhere. So, making sure that we're across that by having a risk matrix in the organisation is obviously massively important. So that's a good takeaway for people to actually go and do something with. And look at their exposure. No doubt everybody's been doing that, but just having a document in place is a good starting point. So I appreciate that as a good takeaway, and appreciate the fact that you would share a template with everybody in relation to that. So that's great. So I think Gary's going to present on some safe harbour stuff now, which is also really important to be across. So Gary, I'll get you to share your screen now too. We've got about sort of 5 minutes, if that's okay, just to ensure that we get through the content today. And obviously we share all this information and content afterwards in slides on our workplace site, but also on our sort of blog post in our website. So if people want to sort of have more information or digest some of this information, it'll be available there as well. So thanks, Gary, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. The topic is safe harbour. That falls within the general category of insolvent trading. As you mentioned at the start, Matt, it's possibly not an over positive topic, but nevertheless, it's a very important one. If a director does fall foul of the insolvent trading provisions, the consequences are personal liability for the debts which the company has incurred. And in addition, if there's any hint at all of dishonesty whatsoever, there is a fine of $240,000 years. So it's fairly serious stuff, all this. The position pre-September 19, 2017, was that there was simply insolvent trading laws operating throughout Australia. And they're very, very harsh laws. They don't operate at all. There's no such thing as insolvent trading in the United States. In England, there are very watered down insolvent trading laws, where a director may have to make a small contribution to the company. But in Australia, what we have is a situation where if you are trading insolvently, you are personally liable to pay the debts of the company in full. Now, insolvent trading, it will occur where a director of a company permits the company to continue trading and incurring debts in circumstances where the director does not have a reasonably objective expectation of being able to pay all the company's debts as and when they become due and payable. If the director does let the company continue trading in those circumstances, then the director can become personally liable for all the debts. And as I said, if there's any suggestion of any dishonesty whatsoever, the criminal sanctions can apply. The problem directors have in Australia is that whilst you can get D&O, directors and officers insurance, for many breaches of the corporations legislation, it's very rare, if not impossible, to be able to insure yourself against insolvent trading. And because of that, how the legislation was operating was that to avoid any risk at all, and instead of continue to trade and maybe restructure the company, what was happening was that the directors would simply place the company into a liquidation or administration without more. So what happened in September 2017 is that the legislation was amended so that directors were then not so troubled by the fact that if they continued to trade, they would become personally liable. And that is where the concept of safe harbour came into play. Safe harbour was introduced as a defence to any insolvent trading action by a liquidator. And the idea behind it was to give the directors some comfort in being able to, which I'll describe in one moment, and not face the prospect of being sued for insolvent trading. The government thought it would be a good idea from a commercial perspective to give directors an opportunity of continuing to trade and try and restructure without immediately appointing a liquidator or going into administration. So that's the safe harbour legislation.
Gary, I know that we've actually, you're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm just conscious of time. Is there sort of a key takeaway message you wanted to get across to today's forum? Just because I'm just making sure that we're able to give enough time for James.
Sure.
And obviously we can share your slides after this particular presentation, if that's okay.
Yep.
Is there something that's sort of significant that
I suppose there is, Matt. In the sense that, as Scott said, the current protections which are available, they cease most likely in September this year. And for directors, it is probably an opportune time now to be thinking about taking steps to put their business into safe harbour. Mm-hmm. Opportunity now to do that. And in the next few months or so until September, that is the perfect time to be doing that.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Gary. I think it's really important that we actually think about these particular things and what's available to us. So the more information and advice and data we have at our fingertips, the better decisions we make. And when we are getting a bit nervous, because this is the stuff that sort of wakes us up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and when we're running businesses, just with the risk of running businesses, it's good to know, I suppose, all the facts and worst case scenario and how we can protect ourselves and our businesses. So that's really pertinent information. So I really appreciate that. And sorry that we didn't have more time to cover it, but because it is a topic in its own right that we could talk about for a long period of time, but at least we've got enough as a starting point to seek further information from that. So really appreciate yours and Scott's time today, Gary. So thanks for that. Our next presenter that we've got is James Horn, who's the Managing Director of Balance Internet. And so I'll invite James to come on screen now. So James runs with his fellow directors, a business that's in sort of digital transformation of organisations. And, I've had the pleasure of being associated with the company for probably about 6 or 7 years now in terms of being the advisor, and watched that organisation grow and help other organisations grow significantly from the things that they do and the transformations they make. And it's really awesome to see how, they can really help organisations become a lot more successful by, taking advantage of digital transformation. So welcome today, James. Thanks very much for attending, for your time. And, I suppose probably the best thing to ask you to begin with maybe is just, a little bit about yourself and about Balance Internet. So obviously I'm very comfortable and aware of what you guys do, given that we've been together for such a long period of time. It'd be good for the other people to hear that.
Thanks so much for having me today. I'm the MD of Balance Internet. As Matt said, we've been working with himself and his team at Prime for quite a while now. And we're a systems integration business. We build e-commerce and transactional platforms. So I think the best way to think of us is as digital engineers. We build websites, we build transactional websites. I imagine most people on this call would probably have bought something online from one of our sites. And if they hadn't done it pre-March, they've probably done it post-March, because during COVID, everyone's been buying online. There's a list of our clients actually there. So you can see just a huge number and quite a huge diversity of clients, from homewares to retail to B2B, the Australian government, Monash University, publishing companies, Fairfax, utility businesses, 7-Eleven, motorcycles, push bikes, furniture, printwear, vacuum cleaners, healthcare products. So all of which are all enabled digitally by our businesses and others. So that's Balance Internet. We've been trading for around 11 years, and myself and my partners, particularly Mel and I, have been working in e-commerce for near on 25 years. David, Mel and I, the three of us have... That's us.
Thanks, mate. I suppose at the moment, because of especially what we're going through at the moment, a lot of businesses are pivoting their business into sort of technology, because of the reality is that they've been shut down or forced to not necessarily have physical presence. So maybe just a question to you around, how can businesses use technology and pivot from your experience?
Would you mind putting the logos up of the clients? I think it's probably not a bad starting point there. So I think the pivoting opportunity right now, it's really interesting. There's been a forced agility that's occurred in the market with digital. So a lot of businesses that thought that digital was important, it's now critical. And whether that's just delivering their normal services to their clients, people are now, for many, the internet and online is the only way that they can communicate. So if you've got products and services that, you're looking to sell or to promote, then now the internet has moved, I think, from sort of that important to that critical position. What we can do to help business and are doing to help businesses is to get them online quickly if they want to change or trial something. So one example is if a business, Scott mentioned a furniture retailer. I think it's a great sort of segue to join it together. But say that furniture retailer, that B2B furniture retailer that was selling office furniture, had its retail supply chain sort of paused or stopped or changed. They might decide to go direct to consumer. So actually build their own brand or their own marketplace and sell that office furniture direct to the consumer, rather than rely on the retail supply chain. 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, and build that out and get it going. A couple of examples that you would all seen on the news, on television, media stories about businesses. A couple of great examples I like to talk about. 13things. So 13cabs have pivoted their business to now be a delivery service to take on Uber. All these taxi drivers didn't have any work. Now they're using that to deliver that, and they're offering local restaurants, local cafes, and ability to get food to their local areas at a more cost competitive price without taking a 20 or 30% gouge I shouldn't call it a gouge in case there's someone from Uber on the call, a fee from those retailers and cafes as part of that service. So they've actually come in and provided a competitive service. Another one's Medcart. Phil Lay, a guy I know quite well, got involved with the Frontliners or Frontiers organisation for medical health care supplies, and he's built a medical marketplace to try and source and procure personal protective equipment. So there's all sorts of opportunities. Hope that's given you some thoughts, but there's probably, everyone on the call has probably got an idea or a thought how they could transform their business.
Cool. So probably a question for you, given that you spend all your time in this particular space, is that, what have you seen change in digital behavior of people? Is there sort of statistics that you've come across, or has there been sort of things that have occurred where you, obviously it makes sense that it's obvious that people are shifting to online because they can't actually buy, face to face. What are the things that you're seeing in the marketplace, and how could some of the people that are listening to this, help pivot their businesses to be able to capture some of that demand?
If you go to the last slide, which is
that one there.
These I can keep going. That one there, yeah. That one. That one before.
That one there.
That one there. Perfect. So a couple of things that we've noticed. Firstly, we've noticed a lot of a change in the demographics online. So a lot of people that were laggards, particularly in online commerce and online transactions, have now been, as I said, have had that forced agility. They've been forced online. One example, very good example, is my own father. He's a 75-year-old roof plumber based in Adelaide, and had never bought anything online and had never really understood what I did for a living. He rang me the other day because he's not playing golf, quite excited and surprised about this whole online retail thing. Wow, I bought something online. Wow, it got delivered to my home. Wow, how easy is that? And I sort of trust it. Here's an example of a lot of people of different ages that have been, and different demographics that have been sort of pushed into online retail, online purchasing, not just for products, but also for services. So that's one change, is now everyone's buying online. Everyone's been forced to. The same way we're all pushed into online banking or pushed into online banking, the same things happen with online retail. So that's one trend. So now everyone's buying online and willing to do it and looking for services online. The second thing that's happened is, if we take retail specifically, so if we look across a lot of broad scale of retailers, both direct B2B, so B2C retailers who've got retail stores, but also B2B businesses or direct to consumer businesses. The amount of trade that they were doing online prior to COVID was around sort of between 5 and 15%, like that range. The rest of it was done, through traditional mechanisms, whether it be phone or whether it be, in store or whatever the other methods were, other channels were. Now that is for many 80 or 90%, and in some cases 100, because they actually have had to close their stores, for instance, or because their customers are being guided online. That's going to resettle, in my opinion, and I don't know whether I'm right or wrong. I reckon it'll resettle at around the 20 to 40% mark. So you're just going to have a huge shift in that requirement. And so businesses in general are going to have to digitally transform to keep up with the demands of those customers. And it's not just retailers, it's everybody in the market. You can't have, a average website. You can't have an average online presence. You can't not be communicating via the channels that are now more powerful than ever. LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Slack, all, you know, Google, all these mechanisms, and eBay, Amazon, well, let's keep going, right? They're all more powerful now because they've been enabled by this. So that's probably the, again, not just important, but critical.
So you see that this is not necessarily a change moment. This is actually going to continue on it's going to become the new norm from your perspective?
I think so. And if you look at the pillars that are sitting on this slide, there's a whole lot of things to consider. I mean, this slide is specifically about online transactions, but you can take the same theories and strategies if you've got a services business or, you know, you're not selling products. So, you know, you've got to look at acquisition. So you've got to go, okay, how am I acquiring new eyeballs, new customers, and how can I use online to do that? And what are the channels I can use? You've got to look at them when you get them to your website, having a great site, having a great experience, so they'll convert and purchase or call you or whatever action you want them to undertake. Then once you've got them as a customer, you then have to retain them. And how can you use digital to retain them as a customer? And then I suppose underpinning all that, and that fourth pillar is the technology that you use to do that and how all that glues together. So it's going to be a permanent, it's a change. People are doing it already, and people were leading and disrupting already pre-COVID. But I think now more than ever, if you don't do it, you may get left behind. And it's also an opportunity to trade yourself out of trouble. You know, there's some opportunities here. As you guys would know, you know, capital is pretty cheap right now. There's lots of incentives to invest. You know, that asset cap going, is it to 150 grand or whatever? I mean, you can build digital assets. I don't know, but I'd imagine under that same piece, right? You could build a new digital asset for 150 grand and potentially get that advantage. So there's opportunities now to pivot your business and invest in your business and this digital area.
Yeah, because obviously it is, you're talking about an opportunity, and this is about creative solutions, and that's what this forum's also to do, is unearth creative solutions for us to continue to thrive and come out of this with stronger businesses. And I think this plays exactly to that particular strategy. And it's not just, as you've indicated, you know, just putting an e-commerce platform or a shopping cart on your website. This is about sort of you know, an end-to-end holistic strategy to ensure that you, as you say, bring leads and customers to you, or to buy your products, for them to buy products and for them to continue to buy products from you in terms of retention. So it's a full strategy you're talking about, as opposed to you know, just adding some e-commerce ability to your website.
Well, we've written a couple of books on this, or guidelines on this, and one of them was published with our partners at Adobe in March. Actually, you know, the timing was pretty good actually. As COVID came along, I think we've been working on for a year, was published, and that's called the it's a B2B digital transformation book. One of the slides, I think, if you want to roll back a couple,
sure.
It just might be interesting because anyone on the call that's potentially interested in ideas around this, it's got like 17 chapters. It's got a whole lot of information around how to handle people, how to handle customer experience, how to handle data management, looking at loyalty, IT landscapes, and it's quite agnostic. So it's not pushing a particular solution or vendor. It's more, you know, holistic. And we also had the privilege of working with almost 50 different experts from the industry and getting their opinions on what was going on. So if you want some light bedtime reading, then there's a link there. You can download this and have a look at it. And I'd suggest don't try and read the whole thing, but just pick the bit piece out that's relevant to you. And it might give you some insights in how.
That's a wonderful resource and very generous to be able to have access to that. And obviously we'll be sharing the slides afterwards, so that that sort of link will be able to give people so they can actually download that. So look, you know, that is wonderful, because really we're going to have a playbook, and that looks like it'll be a pretty good playbook to start to think about, you know, the digital transformation of your business, if you haven't already done so, or if you've done so, maybe in a larger way, because it will become the new norm, as James indicated. So I think that's a wonderful document to be able to have at hand, to be able to assist with us doing that. James, just sort of anything else that you wanted to sort of get across today to people to help them, with navigating through some of this, or where to start, or how to start, or what to do, from a really practical thing to say, well, okay, next steps would be, this is what we do. And I know that you've got a couple of examples there too that might help support that.
Yeah. So maybe just go to the Total Tools one. I think it's quite a good one. This is a traditional retail franchise group who've had to embrace digital. And what they've done is, I think really importantly, adopted a continuous improvement approach. So you don't have to boil the ocean here all at once with digital. Like, you look at it and you go, wow, there's just so much to do. Where do I start? You can start small, MVP, prototype, proof of concept, get up a site, try it out, dip your toe in the water. So in the case of Total Tools, they build a new e-commerce platform in Magento and set up. And then over a period of time, each quarter, they had a project. So one project might be, okay, let's integrate with eBay and marketplaces. The next project might be, let's implement ship from store, because they used to ship from warehouse. The next one they did was, looking at doing personalization of content for different customer personas. The next one might be implementing Zip Pay or some of the buy now, pay later technology. So you don't have to do it all at once. So my recommendation to all would be, work out what your minimum viable is, go and have a crack at that, and then look at a continuous improvement plan. I think the key to that, though, is to always have that sort of 60, 90, 1 year, 3 year view on it. You don't want to do something in 30, 90 days that you're not going to be able to grow into in 3 years. So, because you don't want to create like a technical debt, or, start something, go down a direction, and then have to throw it away and start again. Technology changes all the time. So you need to choose a solution that you can scale into and grow into, but you don't need to start and boil the ocean first and do it all at once. So I hope that makes sense.
It's pretty good advice, sound advice too, because obviously right now, especially for a lot of businesses, that cash is king, as it always is, but probably more so than ever before. So this is obviously making an investment into your business and into the future of it, and making sure that investment's going to have a return, and a significant return. And looking at those numbers on the bottom of the screen there for Total Tools, you can see that investment has paid off significantly. And that's what we need to do. And businesses, very much, as we know, it's all about test and measure. So this is a great example of, let's start something. You've got to start somewhere. And then, as you say, an overarching strategy about what you want to do with your organisation. And then making sure that we've got an immediate plan in place for the next 3 to 6 months. And then it builds from there. So I think that's really sound advice, and great to see an example of that, where you've taken a business that has gone digital because it's required to, and given the market and its competitors. So I think that's a great example.
Yeah, I mean, the thing here, that's over a 3 year period, right? So they didn't boil the ocean all. Typically you look at projects in the old world, and you scope. Let's rebuild the world. Digital changes fast, that it's really important to just try and get in play, and then have that continuous improvement approach, so you can take on the new technologies, the new innovations, the new disruptors as they become available to you. And that's what Total Tools have done, and we're super proud of them, and also all of our clients. If you look at you look at Kathmandu, you look at Cargo Crew, even Monash University. If you go to Monash University and buy something from any of the elements within that university, we've built a transactional platform for the whole university to use to service students who are obviously very digitally hungry, very digitally savvy. So yeah, I think for everyone on the call, all of your customers are now going to get digital and are going to be all over it. And if you don't deliver them what they need, a click of a button, they can be looking at your competitor who might have a better experience. So consider investing in it, but try and consider investing in it in more of an OPEX way rather than a CAPEX way. How'd I go with an accountant speak there? Was that good?
James, I'm very proud of you.
You've taught me well, Obi-Wan.
Exactly. It's nice to know that some of the words that we use on a monthly basis will be catch up resonate with you. But it's true. It's about the investment that you're making it. But it's very, very true with what you said, that if you don't do this, then you can be left behind and your competitive advantage can go very quickly in a changing market. And the other thing that we talk a lot about in your business is about making sure that we're backing the right technology. So that's really important because, as you say, you've got to be nimble and change, but making sure that you're backing the right technology platforms too, to ensure that they're the ones that are going to take you to where you need to get to, and that you're not going to go down a particular path and then have to re-spend. So I think it's important that we think about those sorts of things as well.
Well, that's why we're big fans of Adobe, and have sort of, got a lot of our eggs in that basket, because they've got some great entry-level products, but you can scale into those and, times by 10, times by 100 in what you want to do, and clip all the pieces together over time. I think I've included in the slide deck that you can share some of that Gartner and Forrester studies on different platforms. So there's some places you can look at to see what your options are.
Sure.
But you're right, you've got to choose something that you can grow into.
Which is great. Any final sort of thing that you wanted to get across today that you haven't already chatted about, James?
I just hope everyone enjoys life returning to somewhat normal within the next few weeks, and hope everyone stays safe.
Thanks, James. Look, really appreciate the content, and it's an area that we really, really need to ensure that we're completely across, and appreciate the fact that you've given your time. So that's generous, but also that ebook that you've created. I think that'll be not bedtime reading that will put you to sleep, but very interesting reading that will form part of our sort of strategies moving forward on how to grow our businesses and continue to make them strong and thriving. So very much appreciate your time today, James. So thanks for that.
Very welcome.
Cool. So just in terms of, I've only got a couple of questions that probably not necessary for the presenters. We had one from Lorraine that says, can employees on JobKeeper say not coming to work, don't feel safe? The owners need to hire new extra staff to open stores with low sales and extra overheads, now finding it impossible, hence financial distress. I think that's Lorraine, a question that we're all sort of grappling with at the moment in terms and some of the media that we've got happening at the moment. Well, my biggest concern is, and why we've had some employment lawyers talk historically about that, in terms of how we're going to navigate through some of the complexity of that, and then what that ends up doing for our businesses. So I'm not sure, Scott, whether there's a comment that you'd like to make in relation to, how we've got to deal with employees and how that could end up being financially distressful for us.
I suppose the only thing I'd add, Matt, is that most of the state governments have some really helpful resources available on how to make your workplace safe.
Yeah.
To adopt in order to add more comfort for employees to feel safe in the office. So I'd certainly encourage everyone to take a look at that. But in terms of the employment aspect, it's a little bit subjective and difficult for me to answer straight out, but it probably, as you correctly pointed out, would be more a question for an employment lawyer.
Yeah, that's fine. Wanted to thank everybody again today, Scott, Gary, James, for your time. It's very valuable and we appreciate it. And the more knowledge that we have, the better and stronger businesses that we can create. And that's what we're all here to do. And really, we love being able to deliver all this content to people. So make sure that you keep listening. We record everything so people can actually either share it, reflect back on it. We're happy for people to share as much as they want to in relation to this, because it's part of our give back to the business community that we love and support, because that's why we created the firm that we've created, is to support the businesses and the SME environment in Australia, especially. So, yeah, the more that we can share and collaborate and look after ourselves and each other, the better we're going to be and the stronger we're going to be. So, thanks very much for your time again. We look forward to speaking to you next week.